This is my true story. I worked 40 years to build a life from nothing. I built a home, a company, and a future that I thought my daughter would treasure. I believed my love and effort would mean something to her one day. But one afternoon, she screamed at me, her voice full of anger. "Dad, you're ruining my life." Her words cut deeper than anything I had ever faced. I stayed quiet, but something inside me changed. What happened next, she never expected. Before I tell you, comment where you're watching from, and please subscribe so more people can hear my story. I worked 40 years without rest. I started with empty hands and a heart full of dreams. My first job paid almost nothing, but I stayed because I needed to build something that would last. I worked late nights, missed meals, and saved every coin. Slowly, I built a small company from the ground up. I didn't care about fancy things. Every decision I made was for her, my daughter. She was the reason I woke up every morning, even when my body ached and my eyes could barely stay open. When she was born, I promised her mother that our child would never know hunger or struggle. I kept that promise. I built everything for her: the house, the business, the comfort, the future. When I earned my first million, I didn't celebrate. I bought her books, clothes, and the best education money could buy. I wanted her to walk into the world with pride, never feeling small like I once did. I didn't want her to know the taste of worry or the weight of unpaid bills. She went to private schools, learned from the best teachers, and traveled to places I had only seen in magazines. I watched her grow, strong and confident, walking through life like she owned it. And in a way, she did. Because everything she had was built on my shoulders. Every smile she wore came from my hard work. I didn't mind it. A father's joy is not in keeping. It's in giving. And I gave her everything. There were nights when I came home too tired to eat. I would sit on the couch, still in my work clothes, and look at her photos on the wall. Her smile gave me energy to keep going. I worked double shifts and sometimes skipped sleep for days. When people asked why, I told them it was for her future. I wanted her to have choices, to live freely, not trapped by money or limits. I built the company with my hands and my name, but my dream was always her comfort. When she went to college abroad, I felt proud. I cried quietly at the airport, not from sadness, but from pride. My little girl had grown. I told myself that all the years of pain and struggle had meaning now. I believed that when she came back, she would understand everything I had done. She would see that her father wasn't just a man who worked too much. He was a man who built a world for her to stand on. I sent her money every month, more than she asked for. I told her not to worry about anything. I wanted her to study, to dream, to enjoy life. I didn't realize then that maybe I gave too much. Maybe I made it too easy. I taught her how to spend, not how to value. I taught her how to live with comfort, but not how comfort is built. Years passed, and I bought a mansion, a $2.5 million home that became a symbol of my life's work. Every corner of that house carried a piece of my history. The marble floors, the paintings, the garden, the cars parked in the driveway. They all came from years of sweat. But to me, they were never mine. They were hers. I had already written her name into my will, believing she would protect what I built, not take it for granted. Whenever I looked at her, I felt peace. I thought, this is what success feels like. A father's success is not the house he builds, but the happiness he gives. I thought I had given her everything she needed: love, security, pride. I believed she would grow into someone who respected the roots that raised her. But time has a way of showing you what love hides. I didn't see the change at first. I didn't see the way she stopped listening when I spoke. I didn't notice how she looked at the house not as a home, but as her right. I didn't know that all my giving would one day make her forget what it meant to earn. I thought I had built a daughter who would carry my values. Instead, I had built someone who saw love as control and care as burden. Still, I told myself that it was fine. I had done my duty. I had built the life I promised. What she did with it was her choice. I never imagined that the same comfort I gave her would become the wall between us, a wall made of money, pride, and distance. As she grew older, something began to change. It didn't happen in one day. It was slow, almost silent. At first I didn't notice. I thought she was just growing up, learning about life, becoming independent. But slowly, the warmth in her eyes began to fade. She started to call me Dad only at home, never in front of her friends. Outside, she spoke like I was just someone she lived with. It hurt, but I told myself that maybe this was how young people behaved. I stayed quiet and pretended it didn't matter. She started correcting the way I spoke, my accent, my words, even the way I dressed. She said it lightly at first, but it grew into habit. She became embarrassed when I met her friends. She stopped inviting me to events. If I appeared, she would smile politely, but her eyes showed irritation, not pride. I tried to ignore it. I told myself she was busy, that youth often made people blind for a while, but deep down, I felt the distance growing between us. She began to care more about how things looked than what they meant. She loved the mansion, but never asked how it was built. She wore designer clothes and posted pictures online, but she never thanked me for the life behind them. I didn't expect praise. I just wanted acknowledgement, a small sign that she remembered where it all came from. But that never came. Her world grew bigger, and I became smaller inside it. I started to feel like a guest in my own home. She walked past me while talking on her phone, laughing loudly, as if I wasn't there. The same house that I built with my sweat now echoed with voices I didn't recognize. I saw new faces every week, people who came for her parties, not for family. I stayed in my study most of the time. It was quieter there. I would look at old photos on the wall, her as a baby, her first day at school, the smile she once had when she saw me at the gate. That smile was gone now. Whenever I tried to talk to her about life, she would listen with half an ear. She said I worried too much. She said I didn't understand her generation. Maybe I didn't. Maybe I came from a time where respect meant everything, where love was shown through care, not rebellion. But I still believed that family was family, no matter how much the world changed. The people around her fed her pride. They told her she was smart, beautiful, different. They told her she deserved everything she wanted. I watched as she started believing she had built her own success, forgetting the roots that fed it. She moved through life with confidence, but not gratitude. I wanted to tell her that pride without respect is just emptiness dressed in gold. But I didn't. I didn't want to argue. I just wanted to hold on to the little connection we had left. At night, I would sit by the window and think about her mother. She passed away years ago, but I could still hear her voice saying, "Take care of our daughter." I tried my best. I gave her love, time, and a future. But I started to wonder if I had given too much. Maybe I had made life so easy for her that she couldn't see its value anymore. Maybe, in trying to protect her from pain, I had kept her from understanding effort. Still, I never complained. I never showed her my sadness. I smiled when she walked in, even if she barely looked at me. I thought this phase would pass, that she would grow older and realize what mattered. I thought she would come back to me when life showed her how fragile comfort could be. But life was faster than I imagined. The more I stayed silent, the more she drifted away. She stopped asking for my advice. She made decisions without telling me. Sometimes I learned about her life through other people. It felt strange, knowing everything about her past, but nothing about her present. I was the man who built her world, yet she acted like I no longer belonged in it. The drift between us was not loud or dramatic. It was quiet, slow, painful. It was in the little things, her tone, her distance, her indifference. And while she moved further away, I stayed still, waiting for the daughter I once knew to come back. But she never did. It happened one evening, quiet at first. I came home from work early. The house was full of music and laughter. She was in the living room with friends, showing them new clothes and bags she had bought. I saw the receipts on the table, all expensive, all unnecessary. My heart sank. I had seen the credit bills growing every month, and I had stayed silent too long. That night, I couldn't stay silent anymore. I asked her to be careful, to slow down, to think about tomorrow. She froze for a second, then turned to me with anger I had never seen before. Her face changed, her eyes cold. Her voice rose louder, sharp like glass cutting through the air. She said I was ruining her life. She said I didn't understand her world. She said everything I did for her was control, not love. Her words hit me one after another, fast, hard, cruel. I stood there, unable to speak. My hands shook, but I said nothing. I just looked at her, my daughter, my only child, shouting at me like I was a stranger. The people in the room grew silent. Her friends looked uncomfortable, some even laughed quietly. I felt small, like a fool standing in his own house. The same house I had built for her, the same walls I had painted with my hands, now echoed with her anger. I didn't shout back. I didn't defend myself. I just listened. Every word she said burned into me. She told me to stop interfering, to stop acting like I knew what was best. She said I was the reason she couldn't be happy. When she finished, the silence that followed was worse than her shouting. The air felt heavy. I looked at her one last time before walking away. My chest hurt, not from anger, but from heartbreak. I went to my room, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the floor. My mind replayed her words again and again. "You're ruining my life." They echoed in my ears like a curse. I had worked all my life to make her life better, and now she believed I had destroyed it. The night passed slowly. I didn't sleep. I looked at the photo on my table, her as a little girl sitting on my shoulders, smiling, her arms around my neck. I touched the frame and whispered nothing. I felt tears rise but forced them down. I had never cried for myself before, but that night I almost did. Because it wasn't just anger, it was realization. The love I had given freely was now seen as control. The care I had shown was now treated as a cage. I tried to understand where I went wrong. Maybe I protected her too much. Maybe I gave too much. Maybe I made her believe that money and freedom had no limits. I had wanted her to fly, but I didn't realize that in her eyes I had become the chain holding her back. The thought crushed me. Fathers are supposed to be heroes. That night, I became the villain in her story. Hours later, I heard her laughter again. She was back with her friends, acting like nothing had happened. I sat alone, listening from my room. Every sound from the other side of the door felt like a knife. I realized then that the bond between us had broken. Maybe not completely, but deep enough to leave a scar that would never heal. I looked around my room. Everything I owned had her touch on it. Gifts, cards, drawings from her childhood. I picked up an old note she had written years ago. It said, "Dad, you're my hero." I held it in my hand and felt the weight of time. The same mouth that once called me hero now called me a burden. When the night ended, I made tea and sat by the window. The city lights outside blurred through the fog. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger fades quickly. What stayed was emptiness, the kind that sits deep in your chest and refuses to leave. I realized that I had spent so many years building a future for her that I had forgotten to build peace for myself. That night changed something in me. I didn't shout. I didn't argue. But inside, something broke quietly. It wasn't loud. It was the kind of break that only fathers feel, the sound of a heart letting go. That night after she shouted, I sat alone in the dark. The house was quiet again. Only the clock on the wall made a sound. Each tick felt heavier than the last. I kept hearing her words in my head. "You're ruining my life." I tried to understand how I became the reason for her unhappiness. I gave her everything I had, everything I could ever earn. I thought love was about giving, but maybe I was wrong. Maybe love also means letting go. I thought about all the times I skipped meals so she could eat better food. I remembered the years I wore old clothes while buying her new ones. Every memory came back to me that night, each one sharper than the last. I could see her as a child, laughing when I carried her on my shoulders. I could hear her small voice saying she loved me. I had believed that love would never change. I had believed that children always remember the hands that raised them. But life doesn't work that way. Maybe I had made her too comfortable. Maybe I had made her believe that everything came easy. I had worked through sickness, storms, and loss so she would never have to feel pain. I had built a world where she could walk without stumbling. But now I realized that by removing every struggle from her path, I had also removed her gratitude. She didn't understand what effort looked like. She only saw comfort, not the cost behind it. The more I thought, the more I understood. To her, my advice sounded like control. My care felt like limits. My protection looked like interference. I wanted her to be safe, but she thought I wanted to keep her small. The same rules that I built from love became the walls she wanted to break. I never wanted to hold her back. I only wanted to guide her. But she didn't see that, and maybe she never would. I sat there for hours, staring at the empty chair across from me. That chair used to be hers when she was little. She would sit there eating dinner, asking me about my day, showing me her school drawings. Now that same chair was empty, and I didn't know when or if she would sit there again. The house that once felt full now felt like a stranger's place. The laughter, the warmth, all gone. I looked around and realized how much silence can hurt. It's not loud, but it sits in your chest like a weight. I didn't want revenge. I didn't even want an apology. I just wanted to understand what happened to the girl who once held my hand and promised never to leave me alone. As the night went on, I made tea but couldn't drink it. I felt tired, but sleep didn't come. My mind kept wandering through the years. The first day of her school, her first birthday cake, her first tears. I had been there for all of it. I had seen every moment of her life. And now I was seeing a version of her I didn't recognize. Something inside me broke quietly that night. Not out of anger, but out of clarity. I realized I couldn't keep living like this, giving everything and being seen as the problem. I had to stop holding on to someone who no longer valued my presence. I had to find peace, even if it meant walking away from the idea of a perfect family. It wasn't about money anymore. It wasn't about pride. It was about dignity. I had spent my life building respect, and I couldn't keep letting her tear it down with her words. I loved her, but I also had to love myself enough to stop the pain. As the first light of morning entered the room, I made a quiet decision. Not out of hate, but out of calm. I would stop fighting for her attention. I would stop begging to be seen. I would live with the truth that sometimes love isn't returned, no matter how deeply it's given. That moment wasn't anger. It was acceptance. A father's heart doesn't stop loving, but it learns when to stop bleeding. I promised myself that day that I would protect what I had built, my name, my work, my peace, even if that meant protecting it from her. She thought everything in her life belonged to her. The cars, the jewelry, the trips, the mansion. She acted like they were her rewards for simply existing. She never asked where the money came from. She never thought about whose signature made all those things possible. But everything she touched, every bill she spent, every key she held, came from me. It was my name on every document. My work paid for every dream she lived. She forgot that nothing in that house existed without my hand behind it. The mansion she loved showing off to her friends was mine. I built it brick by brick, choosing every detail myself. The marble floors she walked on, the chandelier she took pictures under, all paid for with my sweat. The company that funded her comfort still ran under my signature. Her cars were registered under my name. Her credit cards were linked to my accounts. Even the jewelry she wore had been bought with my money. Yet, in her mind, it was all hers. She had no idea that every part of her world could disappear with one simple decision from me. I used to think she knew. I thought she understood the structure of things, that she knew how much I had done to make her life stable. But the truth is, she never paid attention. She was too busy enjoying the benefits. She never once asked how the bills were paid, how the staff were hired, how the property taxes were cleared. She just lived like the house itself grew from the ground for her. Even when she shouted that I was ruining her life, she said it while standing in a home I had bought, wearing clothes I had paid for, eating food I had provided. That thought hit me later, and it burned quietly inside me. She had forgotten that I was not just her father. I was the man who built everything around her. She had control over nothing, though she believed she had everything. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this was my mistake. I had let her believe that comfort was her right. I never told her how fragile it really was. I never showed her the paperwork, the accounts, the ownership. She thought the mansion was already hers. But the truth was simple. Everything was still under my name. Every luxury she flaunted came from my approval. And that control, the one she didn't know I still had, became the only power I had left. I didn't want to use that power to hurt her. I wanted to protect her from herself. But that night, after what she said, something shifted in me. It wasn't anger that guided me. It was realization. I had built a life for someone who had forgotten gratitude. I had given my name, my fortune, my years, and in return, she gave me disrespect. She believed she was untouchable, that she no longer needed me. But she had forgotten that without me, everything she owned would crumble. As I sat there looking at the papers in my study, I saw my signature on every major asset: the house, the business shares, the investments, the trust accounts, all connected to me. I held the power to change everything with one phone call. It wasn't revenge I wanted. It was peace. I realized that sometimes the only way to teach respect is through silence, not words. I thought about her future. If I died that day, she would inherit everything without ever learning the value of it. She would continue believing that life owed her comfort. I couldn't let that happen. I had to make her see what she had taken for granted. She needed to understand that wealth is not a gift. It's a responsibility. And I needed to remind myself that love does not mean surrender. For the first time in years, I saw things clearly. She thought she had control because I had allowed her to live like she did. But control was never hers. She forgot that it was my name that built her world, and my name that could erase it. I decided that if she couldn't respect what I had built, then she wouldn't own it either. I didn't want revenge. I wanted clarity. That night, I didn't sleep. I walked around the house, looking at the walls, the furniture, the pictures. Everything told a story: my struggle, my success. I realized then that it was time to take it back. Not to punish her, but to protect my legacy from being wasted. She had forgotten who held the control. But I remembered, and that memory gave me strength for what I was about to do next. The next morning, I woke up early. The sun was rising, and light entered the room slowly. I sat on the edge of the bed, holding my phone, staring at my lawyer's number. My mind was calm, not angry. I had thought about it all night. I wasn't going to fight or argue anymore. I was just going to act. I had spent my life making decisions for business, for growth, for family. This one felt different, heavier, but necessary. It wasn't about money now. It was about respect. I called my lawyer. My voice didn't shake. I told him to prepare an updated version of my will. He asked if everything was fine, and I said yes. I just needed to make a small change. A simple change that would carry the biggest message of my life. I told him to remove my daughter's name completely. No share, no trust, no title. Everything would go to charity and to the people who had worked beside me all these years. People who had stayed loyal when times were hard. People who knew the value of effort and kindness. When I ended the call, I sat quietly for a long time. My hands were steady, but my chest felt heavy. I wasn't doing it out of hate. I wasn't punishing her. I was simply correcting a mistake I had made. I had given too much to someone who had forgotten the meaning of gratitude. I had allowed her to think that love meant endless giving. It was time to show her that even love has limits when it's taken for granted. I walked around the house after that. I looked at the photos on the wall, her childhood, her graduation, the trips we took. I stopped in front of one where she was sitting on my shoulders, smiling with her small hands holding my face. I touched the glass and smiled faintly. That was the last time I remembered feeling needed by her. Everything after that had been noise, demands, expectations, distance. I had turned into her bank, not her father. In the office, I opened the cabinet where I kept the files: property papers, company shares, insurance documents. Everything was organized, everything under my name. I realized how much I had done, how much I had built. I wasn't proud at that moment. I was tired. I had carried the weight of love and responsibility for decades, and now I was finally setting it down. I didn't owe anyone anymore. Later, I went to the garden. The flowers were blooming, the grass trimmed neatly. I sat on the bench and looked at the mansion. The same mansion she called hers. It was beautiful, peaceful, and silent, just like I wanted my heart to be. I decided that from that day forward, I would stop chasing her approval. I had done enough. She needed to learn that money doesn't guarantee respect, and silence can speak louder than any argument. That decision brought me a strange kind of peace. For years, I had lived waiting for her to understand me, waiting for her to love me the way she used to. But people change, and waiting only hurts more. So I chose to let go. I didn't hate her. I still loved her. But love didn't mean giving her everything. Sometimes love means walking away quietly, without shouting, without warning. I knew she wouldn't notice the change right away. She would continue living like everything was the same. She would still smile, still post pictures, still believe she owned the world. But one day, the truth would reach her. And when it did, she would finally understand what I had tried to teach her all her life, that nothing lasts forever, not even the comfort built on someone else's sacrifice. When the papers were ready, I signed them without hesitation. My lawyer asked if I was sure. I nodded. I was sure. For the first time in years, my hand didn't tremble when I wrote my name. It felt like freedom, not from her, but from the pain of being unseen. I left the office that day lighter than before. The sun felt warm on my face as I walked out. I didn't look back at the files or the signature. I didn't need to. The decision was final, and my heart was calm. I had done what I needed to do, not out of anger, but out of love that had finally learned its limit. After I signed the papers, life in the mansion went on as if nothing had changed. I didn't tell her. I didn't tell anyone. I kept the silence deep and steady, like still water hiding a strong current. She walked through the house every day without knowing that her name had disappeared from every page of my will. She laughed. She planned trips. She spent money. She thought the argument was forgotten. I let her believe it. Sometimes silence teaches more than words ever can. The days felt long, but calm. I woke early each morning, had my tea, read the newspaper, and watched her come and go. She didn't look at me much, but I stopped expecting it. I had no anger left, only quiet understanding. I no longer tried to explain myself. I no longer waited for apologies. I had already said everything I needed to say without opening my mouth. My decision spoke for me now. I noticed small things that I had never paid attention to before. The sound of her heels across the floor, the scent of perfume that lingered after she left, the laughter that came from her phone when she talked to friends. She was still living her life as if nothing could ever touch her. I watched in silence, not as a father hoping for change, but as a man who had finally accepted truth. Sometimes people only learn after the ground under them shifts, and I had already pulled that ground away quietly. She posted photos online, showing off the mansion, the cars, the luxury. People praised her for her hard work, and I smiled sadly. They didn't know that her comfort still existed because I allowed it. She had built an image on the foundation of my labor, but she never once turned back to see the hands that built it. I didn't correct her anymore. I didn't remind her. The silence between us became my answer to everything. At dinner, we barely spoke. She would sit at the table, scrolling through her phone, eating quickly before leaving. I didn't stop her. I didn't ask questions. I didn't even look up sometimes. The air was heavy, but calm. I had made peace with it. I no longer wanted to fix what was already broken. I just wanted to live quietly in the home I had built, even if love no longer lived there with me. One evening, she mentioned something about her future plans, traveling, business ideas, big dreams. I listened, nodded, and said nothing. I knew that her future wasn't as certain as she thought. But I didn't interrupt her confidence. She would find out soon enough. My silence wasn't cruel, it was patient. I wasn't waiting for her to fail. I was waiting for her to understand. There's a kind of peace that comes after pain, a peace that doesn't bring joy but stops the bleeding. That's what my days felt like now. The silence became my comfort. I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I didn't try to prove myself right. I just existed, calm, steady, invisible. I had realized something important. Words don't change hearts blinded by pride. Only consequences do. And consequences were already on their way. At night, I sat on the porch and watched the lights of the mansion glow across the garden. It looked peaceful from the outside, the dream home everyone admired. No one could see the emptiness inside its walls. I wasn't angry anymore. I just felt distant, as if I had already left long ago. My body was there, but my spirit had moved on. Each day that passed made me stronger. I learned to enjoy small things again, the morning air, the quiet hum of the world, the taste of simple food. I stopped measuring my worth by her love. I had given her too much power over my heart. Now, I was taking it back in silence. The silence between us lasted a week, but it felt like a lifetime. I could see her walking around confidently, never guessing what had already changed. I didn't need to remind her. The papers were signed, sealed, and safe. One day soon, she would see them, and when she did, she would finally realize that silence isn't weakness. Silence can be the loudest message a father ever gives. It happened a week later, a quiet morning that started like any other. The lawyer came to the house with some papers for me to sign. I was sitting in the living room when she walked in, dressed nicely, holding her phone as usual. The lawyer greeted her politely, not knowing what was about to happen. He placed the documents on the table. I signed the first page and left them open for the next signature. She came closer, curious, pretending not to care. She leaned forward, her eyes caught the words, and then silence filled the room. Her name was missing, the line that once carried her future, her share, her inheritance, gone. She blinked, read again, and her face turned pale. The paper that once promised her the world now had nothing for her. No house, no money, no security. Only empty space where her name used to be. I saw her lips part slightly, but no sound came out. Her pride, her confidence, her certainty, all vanished in 1 second. She looked at me, waiting for me to explain. I said nothing. I didn't move. I just looked at her, calm and quiet. The lawyer, not realizing the weight of the moment, kept talking about legal details. She didn't hear a word. Her eyes stayed locked on the page, searching for her name as if it might appear if she stared long enough. But it didn't. It was gone, erased, replaced by silence and consequence. Her hands began to shake slightly. She looked around, confused, like the house had suddenly become foreign. The walls that once felt like hers now seemed to belong to someone else. She looked at me again, and this time I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Fear. Not fear of losing money, but fear of losing control. For the first time, she understood that everything she had been standing on wasn't hers. It was borrowed ground, built by my hands. I didn't speak. Words weren't needed anymore. My silence had done its work. She took a step back, still staring at the papers, her voice caught in her throat. The lawyer asked if she was okay, but she didn't answer. She just stood there, frozen between disbelief and realization. It was the moment where arrogance met truth. When the lawyer left, she stayed in the room, still holding the papers. I could hear her breathing fast. The silence between us was heavy, but I didn't break it. I wanted her to feel it, the weight of what she had lost, not in money, but in trust. She had shouted that I was ruining her life. Now she could see that I had been the one holding it together all along. She finally sat down, still looking at the documents. Her hands covered her face for a moment, and I saw her shoulders tremble. I didn't need to see tears to know they were there. It wasn't anger anymore. It was something deeper. The shock of understanding how fragile her world really was. I stood up slowly, walked past her, and stopped by the doorway. I looked at her one last time, not with hate, not with pity, but with calm sadness. I had warned her in silence, and now the truth had spoken louder than any father's words ever could. I walked out of the room and left her sitting there, surrounded by the same luxury she once claimed as her own. Only now she finally knew it was never hers to begin with. That moment was the turning point. She had built her identity on the belief that she didn't need me. But the missing name on that will reminded her that everything she had came from me. I had been the root, and she had been the branch that forgot where it came from. Now the branch had felt the wind for the first time. I didn't celebrate. I didn't smile. I just went back to my room and sat quietly. The papers were signed, the decision was real, and the silence had spoken. I didn't know what she would do next, but I knew that for the first time in years, she had truly seen me. Not as a burden, not as control, but as the man who built everything she called her life. After that day, the air in the mansion changed. It was no longer filled with her laughter or her music. The silence that followed was heavier than ever. She didn't talk much. Her confidence was gone, replaced by something quieter, something that looked a lot like fear. I watched her move through the house carefully now, not rushing, not demanding. For the first time, she understood that the ground she walked on could vanish at any moment. The pride that once filled her face was replaced by uncertainty. She stopped posting pictures online. The smiles disappeared from her social media. The friends who once surrounded her began to fade away too. They used to love her for what she had, not for who she was. And now that the news had spread, that her father's will no longer carried her name, those same people started to avoid her. She learned how fast fake friends disappear when the money runs out. It was painful to watch, but necessary. Life was finally teaching her what I couldn't teach with words. Days passed like slow rain. She tried to speak to me a few times, but the words didn't come out right. She looked lost, confused, smaller than I had ever seen her. The anger was gone. In its place was regret. She started spending more time at home, sitting quietly in her room, thinking. Sometimes I saw her standing in front of old photos on the wall, touching the frames with trembling hands. She didn't cry in front of me, but I knew she cried when I wasn't there. A father can always feel his child's pain, even through walls. One evening, she came into the living room while I was reading. She sat down across from me, silent. Her eyes were red, her hands shaking. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. I could see everything written on her face: guilt, sorrow, understanding. I didn't move. I didn't offer comfort. It wasn't cruelty. It was time. Time for her to face the truth. She had spent years thinking she was the center of everything. Now she saw how quickly that world could change when she removed her own foundation, respect. She started changing in small ways after that. She spoke to the staff politely. She stopped buying unnecessary things. She stayed home more. She even helped with small chores, things she had never done before. It was strange to see, but it gave me a quiet sense of relief. Maybe this was the lesson she needed, not through punishment, but through consequence. Sometimes, people only wake up when comfort is taken away. But even as she tried to change, the weight of her mistakes stayed with her. The mansion no longer felt like her kingdom. It became a reminder of what she lost. Not the wealth, but my trust. That was something money could never replace. I saw her looking at me sometimes as if trying to find the father she had pushed away. I wanted to reach out, to hold her, to tell her it would be okay. But I stayed still. She needed to earn her peace this time. News of the will spread further than I expected. Some distant relatives started calling, asking questions. She felt embarrassed. Her friends whispered behind her back. She stopped attending events, stopped pretending. She began to see the truth, that love built on money is weak, and pride built on others' work never lasts. The mansion that once made her feel powerful now made her feel small. She finally understood what it meant to lose something that was never truly hers. I didn't feel proud or happy. There was no victory in her pain. There was only quiet understanding. I hadn't done this to destroy her. I had done it to save her. Because if she had continued down that path, she would have lost everything, including herself. Now she had a chance to rebuild, to remember where she came from, to understand that respect is worth more than inheritance. At night, I would hear her moving softly through the halls. Sometimes she stopped outside my door, but never came in. I knew she wanted to say sorry. Maybe one day she would. But even if she didn't, I had peace now. She had seen the truth with her own eyes. She had lived the silence, felt the emptiness, tasted the consequences of pride. And that was enough. The fallout wasn't loud. It didn't happen in one big moment. It unfolded slowly, like the quiet end of a long storm. But in that silence, both of us changed. She learned the value of respect, and I learned the power of letting go. The days grew quieter after everything. The house felt peaceful again, but also empty. I walked through the halls slowly, touching the walls I had built with my own hands. Every corner of that mansion told a story of love, work, sacrifice, and time. It had taken me 40 years to build, yet in one moment it had almost lost its meaning. Now it was just a building filled with lessons that came late but still mattered. My daughter stayed in her room most of the time. She no longer shouted or demanded anything. She had changed, not completely, but enough for me to see a glimpse of humility. Sometimes that is all a father can ask for. I spent more time sitting outside in the garden. The air felt lighter there. The sun touched my face gently, and I could finally breathe without pain in my chest. I didn't think about the argument anymore. I didn't replay her words. I just sat there, letting silence settle where anger once lived. I realized that peace doesn't always come from being loved. Sometimes it comes from finally letting go of what hurt you the most. She started talking to me again, slowly. Small words at first. Good morning, good night. No long talks, no apologies, but I didn't need them. A father knows when a child's pride has broken, even without words. I could see in her eyes that she finally understood the truth. She had lost more than money. She had lost time, trust, and the simple comfort of love freely given. She didn't need me to explain anymore. Life had explained for me. I didn't change the will back. I had no reason to. The decision wasn't made to punish her. It was made to protect what I had built. The mansion, the company, the savings. They would go to people who valued them, people who understood hard work. My daughter would have to find her own path now. She was young, healthy, and capable. She would survive. But she would have to rebuild from something stronger than pride this time. Sometimes she sat with me in the evenings, quiet and thoughtful. She didn't look at her phone as much anymore. She just sat beside me, watching the sky turn orange and fade into night. We didn't talk about the will or the past. We didn't need to. The silence between us now felt different, not angry, but peaceful. There was still love, just older and wiser. I looked at her sometimes and remembered the small girl she once was, the one who ran to me after school, holding her drawings, smiling with missing teeth. I missed that version of her, but I knew she was gone. Life changes people. Pride changes faster. But I still loved her, even after everything. A father's heart doesn't forget, even when it forgives quietly. The world outside saw me as a man with a $2.5 million mansion, but they didn't see the price I paid for it. They didn't see the nights I worked when everyone else slept. They didn't see the loneliness that came with success. I had built everything for my family, not for myself. But in the end, all I had was myself. Maybe that's how life works. You build for others, and life leaves you with lessons instead of company. Sometimes when I walk through the house, I whisper to myself, "You said I ruined your life." I only took back what I built. It's not bitterness, it's truth. I gave her everything until there was nothing left to give. And when she finally pushed too far, I gave her the one thing she didn't expect, the chance to stand on her own. That was my last gift as a father. Now, the nights are calm. I eat alone, I rest early, I wake up with the sun. I no longer wait for apologies or visits. I have peace, and that's enough. She comes to see me sometimes, sits quietly, and I can tell she's trying. I don't need words. Effort is enough. Maybe one day she'll build her own house, her own life, and maybe she'll think of me when she does. Maybe she'll understand that I didn't remove her from the will out of hate. I did it out of love that had reached its limit. I look out at the garden, the house, the fading light, and I feel calm. The pain has softened into understanding. I did what I had to do. I raised her, I taught her, and when she forgot, I reminded her. Not with anger, but with action. That is a father's closure. Not revenge, not pride, just quiet truth. She may not thank me now, but one day she will. And when that day comes, I'll be gone. But she'll finally know that everything I did was for her, even the silence.